with a master's degree in renewable energy from Cranfield University in England, UK, and a stellar academic and field record, his work is shaping how energy becomes equitable, sustainable, and future ready.
you know. So we had to find out what the scale of the problem, and we used Mpumalanga because in Mpumalanga there's a lot of coal, there's a lot of forest, and we actually found, we went to some communities in Mpumalanga to do.
How the technical training and policy reforms for the emerging green hydrogen economy. And also, I will merge two other questions. Small business enterprise, how it plays SMME like in South Africa, and also
Be done, for example, in terms of the subsidy. This has to come from the government. So we made recommendations in terms of now how the government can actually provide this to the people. And we are using Mpumalanga as the first step, but
welcome to another conversation at the intersection of technology, policy, and purpose. Today, I am honored to host Vuyo Mbam, a passionate energy engineer and researcher at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research in South Africa. So, Vuyo is one of the driving voices behind South Africa's just energy transition. So, contributing to national strategies on green hydrogen, battery localization, offshore wind, and clean cooking. So, with a master's degree in renewable energy from Cranfield University in England, UK, and a stellar academic and field record, his work is shaping how energy becomes equitable, sustainable, and future ready. So, let's hear how policy, research, and engineering are coming together for a cleaner tomorrow. So, Voyo, thank you very much for joining this. And your work definitely spans everything from technical analysis to national energy policy. So, first of all, could you start your journey, how your transition from South Africa during the master to UK and like that, and also by telling us what motivates you to your commitment to a just energy transition and how it differs from simply a green or clean one.
okay, thank you for the wonderful presentation, introduction, sorry, and also the opportunity to be on your platform and engage with your audience. Um, so I studied my undergraduate degree at Nelson Mandela University, that's here in South Africa, and that was in mechatronics. So that's combining your mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and a bit of computer sciences. And at the time, I was mainly interested in, the aerospace industry, control systems, and all of that. But in my final year, I came up across the Commonwealth scholarships, which fund students from all across the Commonwealth to go and study in universities in the UK. And part of the Commonwealth scholarships goals is to support sustainable development throughout, developing countries, especially those in the global south. So when I was looking at the requirements of the scholarship, and also reflecting on the lived realities of many South Africans, I had to identify a problem that was connected with the scholarship's mission. And for me, what connected the most was, Sustainable Development Goal number 7, which is ensuring, access to modern energy that is reliable and also that is affordable, to populations in developing countries. So I made my application in relation to that. And at the time, I remember South Africa was experiencing a lot of challenges with its electricity supply. We had what we call load shedding, which is basically the generation system or generation capacity not being able to meet demand. So we'd have many hours during the day without electricity. So that motivated me to then apply for the scholarship in the UK. And then to do that, I also had to identify a university that I wanted to go and study at. And I had to screen the various universities. There's a lot of good universities in the UK, but I wanted to find something that speaks to me and I was interested in a place that's, quiet, that has a good, research output. So I found Cranfield, which is not a very popular university. It's I think, the only postgraduate university in the UK, postgraduate only, so no undergraduate students. So I identified Cranfield. I applied to Cranfield. I think I also applied to Manchester University. I got offers from both, but I had put Cranfield as my number one choice, and that's where I really wanted to go. So I ended up going to Cranfield. At Cranfield, I did the MSc in renewable energies. Again, this is connected to South Africa. South Africa's electricity supply is mainly from coal, but we also have a lot of potential for renewable energies, both solar and wind. So I wanted to be at the cutting edge of the energy sector, which at the time and still now is renewable energy. So that's why I applied for that particular program. And it was, I had one of the greatest years of my life. The MSc was a 1 year program, and I met so many, incredible people from the academic staff and also my classmates, and then other people that I met from my accommodation and in general around campus. So it was a very great experience that has shaped who I am and how I engage with the world now. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. I don't want to have like a long monologue. I'll allow you to ask some questions.
So, after a UK master degree, what motivates you to come back to South Africa, not to stay in UK and find some career or something like that?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's mainly, when I took up the scholarship, it was a scholarship that required you to sort of plow back because I've been offered an opportunity to come from South Africa to the UK, get some, academic expertise, get exposed to all this knowledge that I got from my master's. But now, I have to come back and give back to the country, try to advance sustainable energy and sustainable development in South Africa. So for me, it was more, I would say, of a mission to try and come back and contribute to the country. As I mentioned, at the time, we were facing quite a lot of challenges to do with the electricity supply. And perhaps one of the solutions to that was to, diversify our supply with renewable energies, which is what I studied. So I saw a lot of opportunities to come and, give back to South Africa. And at the time, also the scholarship, there was a requirement that, you come back, you spend some time, and then if you want to go back to the UK, you can go back. But for me, I mean, now I think it's been about 3 years that I've been back, and, I'm still at this side because there's still a lot of impact that I see myself making in shaping the South African energy landscape. And perhaps at a more broader level, even the African energy landscape, there's a lot of African nations that still have inadequate electricity or energy infrastructure. And there's a lot that needs to be done there, particularly by, people from the African continent. We need to do things by ourselves. So there's still a lot of opportunity for me to get a lot of work done and have more impact within the country and the continent. Yeah.
Very nice, very nice. That's good. And if you can say that about the technical projects and policy focus, you have worked on localizing battery storage technologies. What's the potential of lithium ion or vanadium redox flow batteries in South Africa?
Mm, yeah, so this mainly comes, from again the energy transition in that South Africa is embracing these renewable energy technologies and energy storage, right? But we need to also sort of gain from it because there's a lot of job opportunities. South Africa has a high unemployment rate. So we have to try and create jobs even in these new industries such as solar PV, lithium ion batteries or vanadium flow batteries, right? So we've at the CSIR, we've done some work looking at, localization opportunities for particularly on my side, I focused on lithium ion batteries and vanadium flow batteries. And the main challenge I would say, is it's the scale of demand. So for you to be able to create and sustain an industry, you have to have offtake. So I'll use an example, China, which is the leading country in lithium ion batteries and other forms of energy storage. China has a huge population, has a huge demand. So from the electricity sector and also electric vehicles, which these batteries are used in. So it's able to produce them at scale because it knows that there will be offtake of these batteries. But when you come to South Africa, the issue is that we have a very small population. I mean, if you compare with China, even the United States, it's a very small population. So you have a problem in terms of scale. And then another problem is to do with the technical expertise. From a research standpoint, there's a lot of research that has been done in South Africa, particularly, I think, in the beginnings of research about lithium ion batteries, there was actually a lot of research that was done at the CSIR to develop fabrication methodologies for things like lithium manganese oxide cathode active materials for lithium ion batteries. But, that was never, I guess, taken up to commercial scale, and the IP might have perhaps been licensed out of South Africa to countries like China. So even at this point, we still are at the CSIR, we have a research group that still does cathode active materials research, anode active materials research for lithium ion batteries. But it's just not going, at a scale to commercialize because we can't really, like, we don't have offtake. So what we've seen in South Africa in terms of industrialization and commercialization is that we have companies that import lithium ion cells and then assemble them in South Africa to then sell to the market. And the main market that is being serviced is, the battery energy storage system. So your residential sector for backup power, the commerce and industrial sector, be it malls, be it factories, so that they can store backup. But for example, we don't have scale to produce or assemble cells for an EV market because the EV sales in South Africa are so low. And then when I go and speak about the vanadium side of storage, this was just about, lithium. South Africa is one of the highest reserves of vanadium. But the problem with this technology is that even though there's a lot of research in the past that has been done in countries like Australia, it hasn't been sort of had demand. There's not a lot of demand for vanadium flow batteries in the market, let alone South Africa. So it's quite difficult. There's a company that has a vanadium mine in South Africa that had invested in creating a vanadium flow battery manufacturing business. But I think that company has sort of struggled financially, and they were even considering selling the energy arm of the business. So there's a lot of challenges with vanadium flow batteries, but if there was investment to advance the research within South Africa. And if we had a big enough market, perhaps then we could explore where industrialization opportunities might be because, we do have the materials. We don't have to struggle for materials as that might be the case in lithium ion batteries. Yeah, I hope this has, comprehensively covered
That's
the
right.
question.
Really comprehensive, and that's good. And how did your approach integrating the just transition principles into the offshore wind roadmap?
Okay, that's another project. So At the moment, South Africa doesn't have offshore wind, right? And this was a project to develop a roadmap for offshore wind in South Africa. But it's being done in the context of the fact that South Africa is going through this energy transition. So whatever industry you try to bring in, you have to weave in the principles of the just energy transition. And in South Africa, we're mainly guided by three principles in the energy transition. That is, we need to ensure, one, that there is procedural justice, which means that we engage with all stakeholders of society before doing any project, such that those projects have a social license to operate, right? The second principle is ensuring that there's distributive justice. So the risks and the benefits of such projects are divided equitably so that we don't create a situation of winners and losers, particularly in a country such as South Africa, where there's so much unemployment, so much poverty and inequality. We definitely need to make sure that distributive justice is taken care of. And the third principle that guides our energy transition is restorative justice. And this is mainly looking at the past of where the country comes from apartheid, segregation and all of that, and ensuring that we don't exacerbate the inequalities of the past and the injustices of the past with what we're doing. So in this offshore wind energy project, we had to come up, with ways of how can we ensure that developing an offshore wind industry in South Africa really, advances or adheres to these three principles. And in that, we looked at things like one, education and training. That's a huge thing. If you're going to be developing an industry in the future for offshore wind in South Africa, you need to start now developing training programs such that when you start the industry, you don't need to get talent from abroad. You don't need to get people from Europe, from China, wherever. You can have a local talent base that you employ to whichever jobs are being created in offshore wind, right? And also, we also had to look at now what we call local content. So if you're having an offshore wind project in South Africa, how much of that project, is actually like the components, how much of those components are being procured from South African companies to now, this is again to boost the economy in those regions that would be having offshore wind projects. This something similar has been done in the UK, I think, around the North Sea and the northeastern parts of the UK, where there's a lot of offshore wind activity going on. And there's been a lot of industry that's been developed around offshore wind. I think there's an industrial cluster, I think it's called Teesside in the UK, where there's a cluster, industrial cluster of manufacturing for the offshore wind sector. So how do we create such things in South Africa such that developing an offshore wind industry in the country actually creates jobs for South Africans, contributes to the economy's growth, because we also have a slow growing economy. So those types of things. And also, again, when we talk about creating jobs, we talk about direct, indirect, and induced. So how do we also support other industries through offshore wind? So we have a steel sector. How could we integrate our steel sector to supply the offshore wind sector that we will be creating? And then also looking at, the um, broader economic impacts of such an industry. So like that project was mainly how do we bolster the contribution of just energy transition projects in supporting employment and economic growth within the country. Yeah.
That's nice, very nice. That's nice. And can you tell us about your research on clean cooking and heating in the region, which you can spell? Why is this region significant?
Okay, Mpumalanga.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mpumalanga. So Mpumalanga means place of the rising sun. So Mpumalanga is it's a very key province in relation to the energy transition in South Africa. It's where most of South Africa's coal mines are and where most of the coal-fired power stations are. So if you hear about Eskom's power stations, just think Mpumalanga. If you hear about coal mines in South Africa, just think Mpumalanga.
Ah,
So you can imagine that with the energy transition happening, there's going to be a lot of impact on that province. If you say we're going to shut down power stations,
hmm.
a lot of people might lose jobs in Mpumalanga. So it's a very important province to think about in terms of South Africa's energy transition.
Mpumalanga is first and Limpopo and KwaZulu, Natal, like that, yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, those are provinces in
Okay.
South Africa.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like as I'm saying, it's a very important province to think about in terms of the energy transition. But on this case, we were having a project regarding clean cooking. So many people might not think that, South Africa as a fairly, advanced country has an issue or a problem in relation to clean cooking. But in this project, we actually wanted to find out if there really is a problem and also the scale of the problem, if it's there. So as a first step, this would be a national project, but as a first step, we focused on Mpumalanga. But just just throwing some numbers out there, we looked at data. I was responsible for the demand side analysis, so trying to find the scale of the problem. Like in South Africa, I think in 2022 or 23, there was about 8 million people that cooked with what we call traditional fuels. So that's coal, paraffin, or wood. So many people might not think that, there's so many people in South Africa that use those dirty fuels because, that's 8 million people out of 60 something million people, which is quite a lot of people actually. And this means that these people are exposed to, household air pollution. And because of the exposure to household air pollution, there's a risk of them developing many, respiratory conditions, especially for children and women, you know. So we had to find out what the scale of the problem, and we used Mpumalanga because in Mpumalanga there's a lot of coal, there's a lot of forest, and we actually found, we went to some communities in Mpumalanga to do surveys, and we found many communities that still to this day, don't have connections to electricity. And even those that are connected to the grid, because there's so much unemployment in the country, even though they might be connected to the electricity grid, they can't afford to pay for electricity. So what happens is that they end up cooking with either coal or wood or perhaps kerosene, which places them at the risks that I've mentioned. So, there's a lot of that we found. And in the project, we then had to come up with perhaps solutions to help those communities in Mpumalanga to adopt cleaner cooking methods. On the one hand, we looked at the ones that are connected to the grid that could receive electricity. Their main issue is, affordability. They can't afford electricity. So what can the government do on that front? And we propose perhaps providing a subsidy, subsidize electricity for them such that they can afford at least to buy electricity to cook. And it's worth mentioning at this point that in the country, there is a subsidy that's given to poor households or indigent households, which is 50 kilowatt hours per month. But many studies have found that 50 kilowatt hours per month is not enough. You can basically use that for lighting, perhaps for your TV, but you can't do it for something as energy intensive as cooking. So in the project, we've proposed that perhaps the government can increase the subsidized amount. And then you also have to address the households that don't have access to the grid, that aren't connected. And in this one, you can perhaps look at, can you extend to the grid to them? Or can you have perhaps an off-grid solution to help them, such as rooftop solar PV systems with backup? Or can you provide LPG stoves, that is liquid petroleum gas? Perhaps they can cook with those. So we did a kind of a cost-benefit analysis to find out what was the best option for unelectrified households. And what we proposed, in the study was that the government can invest or support those households with off-grid electricity solutions, that solar PV and battery storage systems for their households. This can help them use electricity for cooking, but beyond cooking, they can also now use electricity for lighting, for their TVs. And, this has more benefit perhaps to something like LPG, which you can mainly use for cooking and heating. You can use electricity for also helping the children in the household be able to study when it's at night, because now they have electricity to light up. Whereas if they had LPG only, they perhaps won't be able to do that. So that was the project and the part that I was responsible for. But other parts of the project also looked at, the supply side of things. Is there companies in Mpumalanga that can supply perhaps the solar PV systems? And if there aren't companies, what can be done, to sort of create an industry around this? And also from a legislative or regulatory perspective, what can be done, for example, in terms of the subsidy? This has to come from the government. So we made recommendations in terms of now how the government can actually provide this to the people. And we are using Mpumalanga as a first step, but the goal is to have this roll out to other provinces. As an example, I'm from the Eastern Cape province of South Africa, and there we also have this challenge. I mean, I remember even at my household, we used to cook with biomass. We used to use biomass and wood, and there's still a lot of families that use those things for cooking. So there's a lot that they can benefit from such interventions, from the government and perhaps other stakeholders that are interested in lending a helping hand. So that's the gist of the project, yeah.
Very nice, very nice. I will summarize the last question, maybe about the hydrogen economy, hydrogen energy, green hydrogen, how the technical training and policy reforms support the emerging green hydrogen economy. And also, I will merge two other questions: small business enterprise, how it plays SMME like in South Africa, and also, what message you have for the youth who are passionate about sustainability and public service, and like leadership roles in global flight for climate justice, something like that. So if you can summarize all in one, yeah, please.
Okay, okay, no problem. Yeah, for green hydrogen, it's a key emerging sector or industry that South Africa wants to heavily invest in as part of its green economy strategy. So the country wants to be a producer of green hydrogen and an exporter to areas such as the EU and perhaps the UK and some parts of Asia, such as Japan and South Korea. So it's going to be, if everything happens as planned, perhaps we have a just energy transition investment plan and implementation plan that talks a lot about green hydrogen. So if everything goes according to plan, this could be a key industry for South Africa. So what on our side, as the CSIR and my research group in particular, we looked at the current available skills in South Africa and what can be done to enhance, the education and training sector in South Africa to cater for the future hydrogen sector. And my particular work in relation to this was the technical, vocational education and training colleges. So how can we change the curricula in TVET colleges to create programs that can equip learners to be able to work in green hydrogen jobs? So for this, we had to benchmark with what's been done perhaps in the UK, in the EU, in Canada, and Australia, the United States. What skills are being developed there that we can borrow in South Africa and also try and train our own workforce and our own learners to be able to be absorbed in the future, green hydrogen jobs, and also other related jobs such as perhaps in the renewable energy sector. So it's a very important aspect also of the just energy transition in that we want to create jobs for people. So if we're moving away from coal and moving towards renewable energies and green hydrogen, we need to get people skilled up so that when these things happen, they can be absorbed, right? So that was the main focus of this. And then I think your second question was in relation to
Yeah, small
what can
small businesses, and
small businesses.
yeah,
Yes, yes. So in
so,
our work,
yes.
yeah. Yeah, in our work, looking at value chains and perhaps green hydrogen, we try to identify what South African small businesses perhaps can aspire to do to get engaged in this. And the most, prevalent opportunity for them is setting up installation businesses. Over the past 2 years, the solar PV business and the battery energy storage backup business has been booming in South Africa. And that's definitely one of the first areas that South African small businesses can actually look to. And there's a training program that the country provides for people who want to be installers of solar PV. And a lot of youth, can look to that and develop those skills, particularly, I would say, unemployed graduates who have perhaps degrees or certifications in electrical engineering they can look at those. But there's also an opportunity again in terms of for either solar PV or batteries to establish assembly facilities for those technologies that they can then retail or sell to end users and other businesses. There's also other opportunities in the energy storage sector. That's battery management systems for those that have expertise, perhaps in electrical engineering and electronics. They can try and create battery management systems that they can then sell to the existing um, assemblers of battery energy storage systems. So there's quite a few opportunities that, the youth and small business enterprises can look to. And this is not only just technical, but also in terms of project management, legal advice and financing, looking at the business models for renewable energy technologies and advising businesses. So if, there's youth that have skills in those areas, which they can leverage those to get involved in the energy sector. And then your last question then was in relation to, motivation or
Yeah,
what can
motivation. Yeah.
African youth do? I would say, the first of all, we all need to be more informed about what's happening. If you are interested in the energy sector, get more informed about, policy direction and other things in terms of the regulatory environment that are happening in your country, and perhaps question why certain things or certain decisions are being done. Africa has a large population, especially a young population, but most Africans, are unemployed or are impoverished. And sectors such as renewable energy actually provide avenues for youth empowerment, youth employment, deploying renewable energies at, their grassroots level, be it either through socially owned renewable energy projects, or even trying to create companies that can install for the local businesses in their areas throughout the continent. These are things that, African youth still should maybe perhaps start thinking about. But also in terms of advocacy, I mean, climate change is a reality, and it's something that we need more youth to be aware of, and we need more youth to advocate, especially agitate for their governments to start taking action, because whenever there's, a climate-related disaster, the least developed countries are the most at risk and for adverse. If there's a drought, African countries and other least developed countries are the worst affected if there's floods, so we need to um, try to agitate and speak to our governments to actually invest in the infrastructure that's required for climate resilience, and also perhaps, agitate our governments to engage their colleagues or their counterparts in the broader international community, to help support um, African countries build the resilience and the energy systems that are going to be required for the future. I think another point, and a very important point that I want to make, is, Africa is very blessed with natural resources, be it from energy supply, oil, uh, coal, whichever, and also resources that are required to create these technologies such as PV and batteries. And we need more youth to advocate for the use of those resources for the betterment of Africa and their own countries. If we talk about the DRC and the extraction of cobalt and other um, resources from there without really creating any value for the people of that country. We need more youth to speak up against such things. We need to have youth advocate for their own interests, because we are the future. We need to have sustainable development. What happens now should not put our futures at risk, and the futures of those after us. So we have a huge burden, because we are living in a transition period away from fossil fuels to new technologies. But it can't be the case that we move to those new technologies and Western countries get more developed while we, regress and don't get any benefits out of these. And this is mainly a conversation for the youth to have with the governments in their own countries, put pressure on, the governments in their own countries to actually have their interests at heart, and advance the interests of them as the youth.
Very nice,
Yeah.
very nice. Thank you for highlighting this crucial point. Not the Europeans or the developed countries. They have to focus on the local population, how they are suffering, and how they can get the benefit. Thank you, Voyo, for sharing your expertise and your mission to ensure the energy transformation benefits all South Africans, not just technological, but socially and economically as well. So, to everyone watching, if today's session gave you clarity or sparked your interest in energy justice, renewable energy policy, or Africa's green future, please share, comment, and continue the conversation. Until next time, let's innovate with impact and ensure no one is left behind in the transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.